Yes, oh my gosh, indeed. So I am the host now. Yay. Oh, oh, we have a guest. Yay, we have lots of people at our meeting. Yay.
Oh, goodness.
It's always good.
Yep. How you doing? So I see we have David. We have Ed. We have Jeff, although I don't see Jeff and I haven't heard Jeff. And I see we have a guest. We have Ryan Giuliani. And 3/22/21. Okay. So Jeff, are you there?
Yes,
Yeah.
I am here.
Yay. Okay. So we have a quorum and we can start our meeting. Now I am actually we open the meeting at 6:30, close enough. So I'm actually the host, so I'm gonna have to keep an eye on participants because Ashley may be the host because she was able to start the call, but she may have funny connectivity because she's actually traveling and her mobile device may not have good connectivity. So I do have to check every now and then, and I may have to be allowing, accepting people into the room. So I'll keep an eye on that. I did send the agenda out, and then I sent it again. And David, thank you very much for those two links that you sent, the parcel viewer and also the topographical map. So perfect. Thank you very much for that. I added that to the reference document and I resent the reference document and the agenda item is there. I do have the minutes you've had for a while now from February 8th. I do owe you the minutes for March 8th and March 15th. So, and I know that Jeff had said, I'll attribute this idea to Jeff, that we actually could approve things like minutes and even the agenda in email. So I'm certainly happy to do that. When I do send them out, I'll try to send you the 3 minutes all at once. And if people do approve them via email, then we won't need to cover them in the call. But if not, we will. So that's okay. So I will acknowledge our guest first. Ryan, did you want to say hello? And did you want to tell us why you're here?
Oh, hello. I'm here just to listen in on the rezoning board, just to see what you guys are talking about.
Okay. Now I will say I will pull up the agenda. I'll go ahead and share my screen. Now I do know that Michael will not be here because he's has something going on, and he did let me know that. Connor didn't really let me know if he would or wouldn't be here, but he is aware of the meeting. I had texted him earlier, so we hope to see Connor. I will share my screen, and my phone's beeping, and I'm not quite sure why, but I don't like to reach for it when we're busy there. So I will run through the agenda and we'll let me first ask, we'll adopt the agenda first. So I will run through this. I was going to say a few words about, I did meet on March 16th regarding the last year's sale with Ryan, who is on the call. I will just mention the building permit moratorium, but just a quick statement on it is all. And then from there, we're going to go on and talk about the housing, because our committee is focused on housing. And I have a bunch of stuff here and some links and whatnot. And then I still have all the links related to housing. We did say we wanted to do PRD and floating zone first. So that's what's on the agenda for today. And then we'll adjourn. And then I did put in terms of future meetings plans, the ideas that I had that we would cover Hamlet areas, large parcel, and the other housing items, which this committee agreed was too much, spread is too thin. So I put them in future. We're not going to try to do them in parallel. So we did agree last time to be PRD and floating zone is the focus area. And I also put, and I also want to, and I will say, I had two people, Ed and Connor, who's not here, ask about Steve Romine getting the telecommunications law. And so this was in the agenda when I sent it for our last.
Here, by the way.
Oh, Connor, wonderful. Yay, thank you, Connor. Perfect. So you're here so I don't have to repeat this then. Perfect, thank you. And thank you for telling me you were there, because when I share my screen, I don't see everybody who's here. I just see 5 people. And thank you. So everybody's here that we expect. Michael, I knew would not be here. So anyway, just to quickly touch on the telecommunications and both of the laws, I sent both of the laws, that and water supply protection, to the town board on March 9th. Their review date is due on April 9th, because we had hoped to have it in 2 weeks, but there's 2 other big documents they're reviewing in the next 2 weeks that were priorities. So they're getting to ours by April 9th. So that's where it is. And we had said, and then they're both going to go, they both may go, right? But the next step is beyond the town board. Who does it go to? Planning board, Matt Rudikoff, perhaps the Association of Towns and or the town attorney. The path is similar for both. And if I find out that there's some steps going to be skipped for one reason or another, I'll let you know. But I do plan to track and make sure everybody knows at all times where we are. And then after this group of people sees it, then we go to the county planning board and have a seeker initiated, and then the public hearing. So we had agreed as a committee, the Steve Romine review ought to be between steps 3 and 4, that after a bunch of officials within Woodstock and the county took a look at it, but before the public hearing, that's when Steve Romine would get it. I'm happy to do it differently, but that's what the board said. So that's the path I'm on. And if we agree something different, I'm okay with change. But again, I documented what we agreed before, and we can change it if we want.
So Laura, just really quick, I think I'm not terribly confused about any of this. I think he really just needs to hear this from you, because I think is getting other information from other places because he's not hearing back. So when I try to console him, I don't have any different answers. So if you can confirm this to him, I'm sure it'll put it to bed, at least for the time being.
Well, you did. You might not have realized you had this as an answer, but you did, because when I sent the agenda last week, it was in there. So I don't know if it was in there the week before, but in any event, I'm okay. I always know these documents by heart because I create them, and I certainly fully understand people don't always realize stuff's in there. So it's okay.
I would like to second what Connor just said. I think Wallace should reach out to Romine and tell him the exact procedure.
Okay.
He's a detail man, and he likes to know exactly where he stands. So if you tell him a precise regimen that we will follow to provide the document to him, then he'll calm down.
Perfect. And I will take that as a to-do. I will reach out to Steve Romine. So that's my to-do, and I accept that. Okay. So that's a quick run through of the agenda. Do I have any motions to adopt the agenda?
I'll give a motion to adopt the agenda.
Yay. Thank you, David. Anybody second it?
Second.
Second, I heard Connor. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I didn't hear Jeff or Ed. I
Aye.
just heard, yay. Okay. Yay. We're good. Okay. So that's good. Now, did anybody happen to read the minutes from February 8th, which you have had for a couple of weeks now? But if you'd rather adopt all minutes at once when I get today's minutes and the other 2 minutes, do we want to address minutes tonight, or we want to do that through email?
How about email?
Okay, we will address minutes via email. Address all minutes via email. Okay, so the first thing I want to cover, because we do have Ryan Giuliani on here. So Ryan, all I was going to say at this meeting about the moratorium was that, well, anyway, I was going to say that I did have a meeting, certainly with Ryan and Jesse Halliburton, and regarding the Lasher sale. Kirk Ritchie and Susan Goldman from Housing were there, Bill McKenna, and Bill McKenna was told, oh, you know, everybody will be there all morning. And in fact, some of us knew to show up at 10 o'clock. So Bill McKenna showed up at 11 o'clock, having been told that people would be there all morning. So we'd been there for an hour, and I'll tell you, it was 20 degrees. And anyway, after an hour, I was done. So that was that. But I will say, Jesse and Ryan did a very nice presentation about, you know, it was just talking. It wasn't like showing a lot of stuff, but talking about what the plan is for Lashers. And so we did have a good conversation. That's kind of my summary of the meeting. It was a good conversation, and we all have to give some more thought. The moratorium, I know that the Housing Committee did document their thoughts on a moratorium statement, and based on our meeting last week, I took their statement and added a couple of statements and sent it back to Bill. So the moratorium statements are kind of in front of the town board right now. And that's really all I was going to say at this meeting about the moratorium statement or the Lashers visit.
It's on the agenda for Tuesday.
Okay. Yep. Not a surprise. So yes, and I haven't read what Bill's going to show us yet, but I will take a look at what Bill's going to show us. But again, I did give him some of our feedback today. So, okay. So that was that. And Ryan, since that was the topic that you probably were going to be here for, that was all I was going to say about that topic. Did you want to say anything before we move on?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so in any event, so the next thing, I know that Jeff had done some research, and we had agreed before. I know that Jeff and Ed and Connor agreed to be a sub team on housing, although I appreciated that David also sent his email with some thoughts about housing. And truly, as I've said, I see this whole committee addressing housing. So I know Jeff brings along some really good ideas. And what we want to do at this meeting is we have a bunch of files that have been shared. We have something that that Jeff had shared with some people earlier than today, and I just shared today, this Ellington, Connecticut floating zone. I know that Jeff has shared some, I know there's an urgency. A lot of people feel an urgency, sorry, excuse me. A lot of people feel an urgency on this. And so I didn't know, Jeff, what your thoughts were. I was actually going to ask you your thoughts, because as you have said, sometimes it seems like we talk a lot about process and we're not actually moving the ball forward, and we need to move the ball forward. And I agree 100%, we need to move the ball forward. So we have in the first 13 minutes addressed process and a couple of topics. And for the remainder of this call, I'm certainly happy to talk about how do we move the ball forward, who should be doing what should everybody read, what are the next steps. And I know Jeff's been giving a lot of thought to this. So Jeff, I was going to ask you, if you wouldn't mind, to share your thoughts, if you would like, about how we make the most progress the fastest on housing, given that we've said we're going to do PRD floating zone first.
I guess my first question is, did anyone actually read the floating zone from Ellington, Connecticut? Is anyone else familiar with what they're doing?
I didn't get a chance to look at the Connecticut one, but I looked through the ones that Urena had sent for I think it was Rhinebeck, and there was another town in there.
Rhinebeck I actually don't like very much, their particular floating zone thing. In particular, what I don't like about the Rhinebeck one is that their density increase is very, very minimal. It's hardly even worth bothering. I think it's a 15% density increase for a floating zone. And it's like, why bother? You know, that's like for a 50-acre lot, that's, you know, maybe one more house.
So let me ask
So
a question.
it's
Did Urana just send it? Connor, who all got the document from Urana?
I requested it, I don't remember when, it was at least 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I think it was
Okay.
part of the delivery. I think it was one of the ones that was delivered way back in June. A number of those were, I think, in that packet back then.
Oh, okay. And I've got a couple of things.
I believe so. I'm not positive.
Oh, shoot.
And basically, the Rhinebeck one allows for a 15% density increase if you're doing affordable housing in a large area. And, you know, a 15% density increase is not going to solve anything in Woodstock. We need to go a lot more than that. If you look at the Ellington, Connecticut one, for example, it changes the maximum units per acre to be 4 units per acre, which is a huge density increase in an R5, for example.
Okay, so I feel out of the loop because I'm looking, this document is the document that they gave us when they came, and I do not see Rhinebeck in the list of references. When they came to meet with us back in June of last
It may
year.
not be there, but I don't think it's relevant anyway, Laura. I mean, I think it's not what we want to go for.
Well, okay. But Connor, I still would like it. Well,
we can get it to you. I mean, we can get it to you, obviously, but I'm not
I have
sure
it
it's
on my
anything that
computer. I have the Rhinebeck.
is going to help us.
so do you have a link? Can you put a link in the chat?
Not easily.
Okay. Connor, can you put a link in the chat?
I'm pretty sure it's a PDF. So
It's likely a link to, it's not a link to a PDF.
I don't know.
It's a PDF, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. So I would like somebody to send it to me.
I will do that after the meeting.
Okay. So, because the other
I
thing
think
too
we need
is
to look at what it is that our objective is here, first of all. I think that's where I want to start with this, whether, you know, if we're looking at and come up with some examples of what it is we're trying to do and kind of understand what we're trying to do. And I think if we take a theoretical, say 30-acre lot, right? Let's use the town's property on Xena area as an example property. They have 35 acres of land in the Xena area. It's currently not developed. It's currently owned by the town. It's, if we did the floating zone proposal that was done at it's R5 also, it's R5 to give you our background, it's R5. So that means right now we can put 7 houses on that land with no changes. With the Rhinebeck proposal, we get a 15% increase, so we can put 1 more house on that property. I think if you do rounding, it's 1 more house, right? So to me, that's not really doing anything. If we look at something like Ellington, Connecticut, they propose a floating or workforce cluster housing zone, which has a minimum acreage of 10 acres. If you follow their restrictions on what that means, and the restrictions are labeled here in their plan very clearly, they allow up to 4 units per acre. So instead of that 35 acre property being able to accommodate 7 houses, it can now accommodate hundreds. 4 times 35, what's that? 140. Huge difference in what can be done. Also, part of the thing I like about the Ellington, Connecticut one is it talks about what else has to go in that. There has to be water, there has to be sewer, there has to be green space, there has to be buffer zones around that. And the idea is to allow a zone that has, say, 35 acres or property that has 35 acres to be able to be built into really a dense housing area with a buffer around it, with green space around it, with common utilities, with common areas around it that can make the neighborhood a valued neighborhood. So if you look at that as a proposal, I think that's something that we would like in Woodstock. And we have the land, we have the areas in Woodstock Woodstock that would work well with this, specifically
I
in
gotta
Xena. I
say,
don't know as much about Bearsville or the parts west, but I know Xena would fit well with this.
well, I like using the maximum units per acre instead of just a general percentage density increase. I mean, that alone, I think, would give us a lot of clarity in how we can approach these things.
Yeah. And if you, again, if you take a look at this, if you can read through it, it also allows for multiple parcels to be aggregated together. It talks about the impervious lot coverage, the building separation. It's a very clear and I think well thought out idea. And if you can imagine, again, one or more lots of a significant size being done this way, I think it will allow us to get a decent amount of houses. Now they call it workforce housing too. I believe that this is the one that bases their definition of workforce housing on the, on I think the prevailing wage within the town itself. I have to look at the exact definition of what they do as far as who gets eligibility for this. But so there's, the ways to look at this are how many houses per acre we want to allow people to do in this kind of a zone. That's one step we need to do. What the conditions are and being able to do the zone, and those conditions need to be well spelled out, clearly spelled out, so that someone that wants to develop one of these knows exactly what they need to do in order to do that. The process that they need to go through to approve that, which again, I like their process. It goes essentially to go to our planning board first as a draft proposal. If the planning board agrees with it after discussion and maybe updates, they can then take it to the town board, and the town board is the one that actually makes a zoning change. So what the town board does is basically change the zoning from R5 or R3 in this case to what they call workforce cluster housing. And then the other pieces to that are, under those conditions, how much green space do we need? How much buffer zone do we need? What are the utility requirements that we need for that? So all of those things kind of go into this. And then lastly, it's what the definition of affordable is really important, and what we're trying to do here. I don't think we're trying to build low-income housing. Personally, I think we're trying to build housing for workers in Woodstock, and that's
Well, that has to be low-cost housing then.
What was that, Dave?
I said, if it's for the people who are working in Woodstock, they're not making a lot of money, so I think it has to be low-cost housing.
It definitely is. I mean, definitely has to be low-cost housing, but it's based on the workers. I mean, so a number of ways to do this, right? One is to look at the MFI, the medium family income. One is to look at the income of workers within a town. One is to look at the poverty income, right? All of those things are different ways of doing it. And we need to figure out what it is we want to do here. My understanding of our objective here is to allow people to live and to work within Woodstock. That's my understanding of what the goal here is. So we need to look at the Woodstock income of people that work here. And that's not necessarily the average income, because I think there's people that throw the average income off immensely in Woodstock. So it's more the mean, right? So where the mean number is that people can afford. And we need to create that definition. And so I think there's a lot of different things we need to figure out, which is what the definition of who the target audience is for this, what the process is for them to be able to obtain housing here, and then what the housing can look like as far as density and as far as green space, buffer zones, and utilities, right? Those are all part of what fits into this. And then lastly, the process of how to make that happen. So again, that's all spelled out in this particular Ellington one. That's why I like it's a starting point. It says all those things, and we can look at that and say, we want this, we don't want this, we want this changed. That's my thought, and that's where I was coming from on this, workforce housing thing. And I just want to point out that the Housing Committee prefers to call this Woodstock Community Housing. That's their preferred name, Woodstock Community Housing. Personally, I like the term sustainable community housing better, but that's my take.
Well,
So again,
I mean, we can call it,
I'm not going to get stuck on the name. I'm not going to get stuck on the name. The name's not important. What we do is important.
right.
I noticed that the Ellingham WCHZ zone shall be only used for single-family detached residential housing units. So with this,
Yeah, I would want to change that to, I would think that we want to be able to do duplexes or triplexes, not necessarily large apartment complexes, but something that is more residential in nature. I mean, I don't, what's your thoughts on that?
that's sort of my thinking.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the thought that I have, so our next scheduled meeting would be April 12th, which is actually 3 weeks from now, because this month does have a 5th Monday in it. I know that Jeff and Ed and Connor had volunteered to work on this, and maybe what you'd want to do, or I don't want to deny anybody to work on it that wants to. Like if David wants to work on it, I'm certainly happy to have him jump in. But maybe you'd want to go off with them, use this as a starting point and go off and say, take the Ellington and have work sessions to figure out what you'd like to propose to the rest of this committee in terms of what our document should look like. And do we want to call it workforce housing? Do we want to call it Woodstock community housing? Or I'm okay with throwing the word sustainable in, but in any event, whatever we want to call it, we'll define what we're going to call it. And this can be a starting point for a document. Does it make sense for you guys to go off and have work sessions to adjust this document to what we would like to see for Woodstock?
Well,
I think that's the intention. Yeah.
there are
so.
other, Ellington isn't the only one. This Village of Tuckahoe, New York workforce housing proposal has some things about the type of development where when the owner resells it, I mean, he or she, they have to you have structure that they cannot just get a house cheap and then later on sell it for a lot of money.
Right, exactly. Good point.
You have a system that controls the value of the house from the point of view of the next people that occupy the house, so that they too can participate in affordable,
right,
sustainable Woodstock housing. So and there is some interesting paragraphs in the Tuckahoe, New York workforce housing section that deals with that, and also it's some people rent and some people purchase.
right.
If they purchase, then they have to, given the real estate market, somebody could buy some of these and then turn to flip them. You want to prevent flipping.
Right.
And
exactly.
So that's just something to think about. I mean, it can be built into whatever, we do. We can set up a document and start mutating it and adding to it. Another thing that as long as we're talking about this, is that, there's a talk by Susan Goldman and others about a housing trust. So and that is something that should be kept on our plate somehow. The housing task force is researching a trust. But anyway, I've been thinking about a program for the town or a housing trust to acquire existing houses here and there in town, and then divide each house into 2 to 4 units, then rent them out for less than 30% of income, or something less like 20%. But it's just an idea. If you're going to have a floating zone that's, well, in Ellington, it's like a minimum of 10 acres. Let's say we knock ours down to to 5 acres or 4 acres, but Ellington is 10 acres. And our own PRD is considerably larger, especially for an R8 district and an R5 district. So I mean, it gets down to just a few acres for an hamlet residential district, but Jeff is talking about town property out in Xena, 35 acres, I think he said. That's been researched quite a bit, so that maybe there's somebody in town that has some information about the water availability and the soil conditions that are needed for a septic system. And that's
I know quite a lot about the septic systems and water systems in that area. I've built a septic system and a water system in that area, so yeah, I know quite a lot about them.
okay.
Well, I thought that when I was on the planning board, someone had a plan for that not, that particular plot, but that particular area. And I don't know if they ever finished doing the development that they had planned. So
I developed a school in that same, I developed a school in property just north of the townland. The next property north of the townland is the school property. So we built, a septic to accommodate 100 students, and we built our own water system.
Yeah, well, I was on the planning board when that happened as well.
Yeah, so that's, it's not an easy system to work with. The ground is basically shale to the surface. So it have to be above ground. We have to do some kind of a community sewer. I don't even know if it's practical, but I don't know if it's practical given the soil conditions there and the perk conditions there. I know that Paul Schultes Jr. was looking at that property, the town property, for affordable housing, and decided not to go there because of the soil conditions. So there are definitely challenges, but I think if we look at, we're not trying to look at specific property, we're looking at models of property, right? And what we can do. And I agree with you, Ed, that we do need to make sure that anything we do in this area has to have contingencies on the deeds for at least some period of time, right? You can't just put it up and then someone can buy it and flip it for a huge gain. One idea too is to look at what the housing trust is being, because they're developing the housing trust as we're speaking, right? They're developing the criteria for that. One idea too is to look at what they're using for the housing trust definition and see if we want to put that as part of our requirements too, for the floating zone. One idea might be though, if you follow the same conditions as the housing trust properties, that you can then get accepted for the floating zone. That's another idea too. Or at least look at what they're developing for their conditions for housing trust. And yeah, this stuff does not really work well with a hamlet because it has much larger properties than you see in the hamlet. So I think you're right that we need to do some other approach in the hamlet.
Yeah, we could have a floating zone can be a half acre, really. I mean, or an acre or 2 acres, acre and a half, 3 acres, 5 acres. It's like if you have almost a collapsible floating zone, then you can really build affordable housing units all over the town in a way that won't upset the people that love the open space and that love Woodstock for being Woodstock for the last 1,000 years. So, so if we have a zone that's that it can grow or it can shrink. That's my only point.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah.
But, we have to start developing, like you say, a definition of land trust or a definition of resale for certain types of development, keeping ownership somehow. There are ways of only owning the houses and you keep the property separate. I've seen articles on that, so that it's a complicated thing. So we have to start. It's like writing a novel. You have to start with a 1-page synopsis, and then you add 2 pages, 3, that's how I build my books. You start out short and expand it. And I think if we do that, and we share all the information, then we'll be on solid ground. We can come up with something. Whether we can do it within 9 months, I don't know. It's it's very complicated what we're proposing to do. That's why nobody's done it, really.
Yeah, but like you say, you start. You start. Next thing you know, you make progress. And right. We can't guarantee it'll be done in time, but taking the first steps is a good start. Now, a question that I have: do we have a vision that our zoning law will include housing trust? Because a housing trust to me is an entity, like, say it's like a bank, right? It's going to have money and it will decide who it helps and who it doesn't help. But given that a housing trust is going to be an entity with money that will help people get housing, do we have a vision that will be included in the zoning law of what the housing trust can and can't do? Or is that outside of the zoning law?
Well, a housing trust can be just an entity that owns property or owns buildings, or owns property and not buildings, or owns buildings and not property.
Mm-hmm.
But, it doesn't necessarily have to be an entity that provides affordable housing. It's a trust where ownership and land that comes up. There's in Woodstock, I think there's probably properties that get mortgaged, get auctioned off. And if you had a mechanism for acquiring this land in the name of a land trust, setting aside the issue of giving it out to people. Once you start offering affordable housing, you're going to have 10,000 people, 10,000 needy families want to apply. So,
all over the place, not just from Woodstock, they'll be from all over.
Yeah, well, it depends on your funding. If your funding is of a certain nature, you can restrict it like Jeffrey wants to do, to provide housing for the workforce that works in this area. And, that's a special kind of funding. And, we have to try to set it up. But
and I think the trust thing has 2 factors to it. One is the trust is really an ownership entity. It doesn't define necessarily anything else other than ownership. But part of the ownership entity of the land trust is that it would have restrictions on the rent and the sale prices, right? So
But isn't that the purview of the housing
be
committee?
controlled rents if it's rented. And
it's our
I think you can couple that control with, if you can couple that control with the rent and the sale property, you can maybe then give density bonuses. I think that's where the crossing between ownership and density goes, is that if you have this nonprofit or deed restricted entity, then that will allow the town to be more happy with giving a huge density increase to that property.
So you're saying that would be the tie-in then? Then the tie-in of the trust to the zoning law might be, we might put in the zoning law that if it's a housing trust, but the housing trust would have to be approved, I think, by the town. So if we were going to give the housing trust the ability to do different things with density and whatnot, then we would need to have some approval of that trust. Just because you say you're a housing trust doesn't mean you get free reign.
Right, and you have to, and again, and it has to follow certain, either housing trust or follows the restrictions imposed by housing trust. And those restrictions tend to be a 50-year deed restriction on the property as to what escalation you can do in sales price or rental price. So those are the kinds of things that housing trusts can do. And you're right, Joel, Laura, it's got to be, definition of what it means to be the housing trust. It's got to be a definition of what it means to follow the rules of the housing trust. And we have to then figure out if that's how we want to, one of the mechanisms we want to put in place to control or to allow greater density. I think you can do it a number of different ways. Like the Ellington one does not talk about deed restrictions, and maybe it should, at least for some period of time. Maybe not 50 years, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years. I don't know. But allowing that kind of density has certain value all by itself too, because it does increase the market, it does increase the supply, and it will increased supply will change the pricing. Maybe not as much as these restrictions can do, but supply and demand does work. Unfortunately, there's way more demand than there is supply in Woodstock, so it may be a drop in the bucket in Woodstock initially.
Okay. So, so again, next steps. So our next regularly scheduled meeting is in 3 weeks. Mondays are good for me. I'm happy to be available whatever Mondays, except for Memorial Day, which is a holiday. Except for that, in the upcoming months, I'm happy to make myself available any Monday that we as a whole committee want to meet. What do you, I know we have the 3 volunteers for the subcommittee, Ed and Jeff and Connor. And I don't know whether, Dave, if you wanted to be part of that subcommittee or not. I don't want to cut anybody out, but certainly if you wanted to be, you could. But I guess my thought is the subcommittee will meet and hash some things out, and then we'll meet again as a whole committee. And I just didn't know whether you thought 3 weeks was too much for you all to be meeting and hashing things out. I'm happy to throw another meeting in, or if you'd like the 3 weeks, because you can maybe go further if we don't meet again as a group for 3 weeks. What do you want to do next?
Well, we
Well,
just have to, I'm sorry.
Right. No, I think you were going to say the same thing I was going to go ahead.
Well, I just think we need to get like the first document and date it, put a date on it and put who created it. And then we analyze that and build a 3-pager, then a 4-pager, then a 5-pager. And then sooner or later, I know from writing a lot of books, a book gets done, against your will. So if we keep, in other words, we seriously agree on a document, a 2-pager, then we seriously agree on a 3-pager and 4-pager, and then we discuss where we disagree. Then we come up, and then sooner or later, it's almost against our will it would get done, and we're all very busy. We all have 100 projects. But I'd like to bring Dave Menzies. Dave and I talk about affordable housing all the time. So I think Dave should be in on this. He's already gotten interesting information for this affordable housing. And I know that he was always pushing affordable housing. So I think we should have Dave.
Okay, so how do you, I view myself as a facilitator. I'm happy to facilitate anything that you'd like me to facilitate, but sometimes it's right to jump in and sometimes it's right to stand back. So I just want to know whether you want me to try to help facilitate, or would you rather, and I appreciate what you said. I mean, there's 2 approaches. One of them is what you just said, which is you start with a 1-page summary of where the group thinks we want to go, and then you start building pages onto it. The other way is, Jeff has shared with us the Ellington, Connecticut document. The other way might be start with the Ellington document and then change each section to match what we think we want. We could use that as a roadmap, but then as you pointed out, things like density, things like deed restrictions where you can't just flip your house, there are things that probably aren't in the Ellington. So, I mean, there are 2 approaches. One is take the Ellington, adjust it, and build on it. The other is, as Ed said, you kind of start from scratch. You agree to the basis of what you want in there, and you build onto it, certainly using whatever references and resources you want, but that you actually start out with a small document of a skeleton of what you want to do, and then fill in the pieces.
Well,
so
we'll use elements of Ellington, and we'll use elements of Tuckahoe. We'll use possibly elements of Rhinebeck, but we have a 9-page PRD section in our zoning law, and that's right where we start, because we have to get rid of that or alter it, add small. It has really difficult to fulfill sizes of
Mhm.
open space that's needed to do these. So
Right.
we need to knock the maximum size down considerably,
Mhm.
and at least for the R5 and the R3 and the R15, you know, maybe not in the R8, I don't know. But anyway, if we start with RPRD and add Tuckahoe, add Ellingham, add Taste of Rhinebeck, there are other zoning, workforce zoning, and we'll think of a name, you know, a name is very important on one level, but I mean, you could call it Lassie Goes to Washington. I mean, it, you know, a name is, but I would bow to Jeff's and the Housing Task Force name. I don't think it matters, but once you get it, you have to start putting it out in press releases and you get the community used to it. So we need
Right.
of a name and then press release it over and over and over to get the community's acceptance of it, because
Okay.
that's going to be the
Yeah.
difference.
Well, I like the name that Jeff threw out, which really started with the housing committee's name and adding the word sustainable. But I mean, at some point before we get to the press release level, we're, I think we get to have a say too. And if we want to go that way, we can certainly, add the word sustainable, fine with me, but we don't have to decide that tonight. But in any event, so I like everything Ed said. So here's the other question. And Ed has certainly done a fabulous job way back in the 80s and 90s, getting that first, I don't know whether it was only 80s or it fell into the 90s, but getting the first zoning law in place. Ed certainly, I know Dave did a lot of research, and Ed did a great job with the telecommunications. Ed certainly historically, Ed is a professional writer. Sometimes when you have a group, it's good to have a leader, but I know that Jeff has brought in a lot of passion and urgency and ideas. And I don't know whether it makes sense for the subgroup to have a defined leader. Sometimes when you have a defined leader, it kind of helps things flow more smoothly because the leader always knows who's doing what. Sometimes you have a group that's a little more amorphous where you don't have a defined leader. And sometimes I don't know whether you want a defined leader or whether you don't.
I don't particularly care to have a defined leader. I don't care either way. I think we'll work together either way. I don't mind doing the first page draft and taking it from there. I think that this is a collaborative effort, and it's not, I think that if we work collaboratively, we'll be fine. I don't care, if someone, it doesn't matter to me. So I think we have a lot of consensus on what we want to do and how to do it. So I think we can just move forward with that. I think I've never written a novel, and so I've learned how to do that today, which is interesting. So I think we do start with a page. We start with a one pager, and we start from that, and we take the ideas from the PRD, and we take the ideas from Tuckahoe and the ideas from Ellington, and we fit them into our community. And I like the way I put it. We expand it over time until it's perfect. And that expansion is one that's a give and take, back and forth collaborative effort. So I think that's a great way to go.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a consensus. I hear a consensus to go with the idea Ed threw out. And I'm certainly fine with that too, where we start kind of small with a small document, but build on it to make sure we've included all the pieces we want, including the PRD and these other samples. So it sounds like start small and build is what I'm hearing. I haven't heard anybody say don't do that. Build.
No, and if I, novel fluent how to write a novel, if I write a novel, I'll be like, appreciate for it.
So yeah, cool. Okay. And Ed, I know when I asked, should the group have a leader or should it be kind of a collaboration, as Jeff says, do you have any strong opinions of how the group operates? Is the collaboration okay, or do you feel like there should be a defined leader?
Oh, I think as long as everybody who's a participant in the evolution of this document feels like they're not shut out, we all are we're all self-starters,
Yes.
all of us are good at starting a projects and seeing it to the completion. So
Yep.
I don't have any problem working with the Connor and Jeffrey. The issue is to help the town. I don't, we all have our own glory in our own worlds. This is something we're doing. We're sacrificing out of our personal time. I could be watching the NCAA basketball game, but
You can be immersed for a while doing that.
yeah. So we're doing this for good, for the public good,
Yes.
because people are suffering and they can't find a place to live in Woodstock and our hometown. And so we need to intervene in the marketplace in the name of affordability for regular working people or regular families, just normal American citizens who are having trouble finding a decent place to live in Woodstock.
Yep. Agreed. But well said. Okay, so I would ask that as documents get shared, I would ask that they get shared with the entire committee. And I know, I think Ed said after this meeting, he's going to send me the Rhinebeck document that was mentioned. And even though I know, Jeff, you didn't embrace it, however, it's good for everybody to know all that people have been considering, because there might be a sentence in there that, maybe you don't want to use much out of there, but maybe there's a sentence in there that was valued. But in any event, I would ask that as a committee member gets something that the entire 6 of us, were the zoning revision committee of 6 people, including me. So I would ask that when documents are passed around, that all 6 of us get it. So we all 6 have an ability to weigh in if able. I appreciate that we have an active 4 working on this, but certainly I would like to be on copy of documents that are being passed around for review. And also websites that are being used as a reference. So
Okay.
we appreciate that. So when do we want our next meeting to be? Our next regularly scheduled meeting is in 3 weeks. Do we want to wait that long to meet next? Or is it okay because we're going to do this email method? It sounds like we're doing an email method for now. Do we want to do the email method for 3 weeks? Or do we feel like we need to have a checkpoint meeting within there?
What are the rules for getting our own Zoom meeting, for instance?
For a subset to use?
Yes.
I would say ask Ashley anytime that you want to meet. We're using the town Zoom, and so
You just have to have one that isn't in the same slot that the town is using, right?
I would say so. You would coordinate the Zoom time frame with Ashley, correct?
Well, we might want to have once we get going, we might want to have a Zoom meeting for the subgroup. I don't know, it's just an idea.
Yeah.
But I think
I have access to Zoom also. I have access to Zoom account also we can use. I'll just make sure that I can use it for this. It's from the Democratic Committee. I think it shouldn't be a problem as long as it's not in use otherwise.
Okay. Then we're set.
Well, you can have a free Zoom meeting,
You
All
limit
you
it
gotta
to
do is
40 minutes, I
download
think, Dave.
the app.
Yeah.
I think you limit it to 40 minutes.
Yeah, and I've heard that some people do.
They go over 40 minutes. They don't say anything to you about it.
Yeah, but I've heard
Okay.
for the free Zoom that they may cut you off at 45 minutes. But what people do when they use the free Zoom and they get cut off, they all just have an agreement. They'll just get back on again. Then they do another 45 minutes. So, but in any event, it's nice to have a real account that you know is not going to cut you off. But it's up to you. And these informal meetings, of course, would not have to be recorded. So yeah, when we have a formal zoning revision committee meeting, I like to record them. But certainly if you do a Zoom meeting with a subgroup that's not a formal meeting, I don't believe you would have to record it. But I mean, you could if you wanted, but I wouldn't think you would need to. At work sessions, it wouldn't seem you would need to record.
Just want to get one thing understood. Who's going to do the first one pager, just to make sure we're all clear on that? I can do it. If you want to do it, it doesn't matter to me, whichever way works.
You can do it. Why not?
Okay.
Yeah, I think I heard you volunteer before, Jeff, so
I'll make sure that that was accepted, that volunteer opportunity was accepted by people.
cool. Cool. Well, it sounds like we have a plan. We're gonna start with a one pager, build from there. Jeff's gonna do the first
It
one
could be-
pager.
You know, it could be a 3-pager, but just the first
Correct.
document number 1 that's dated and paginated.
So there you go. So it'll have versions. Well, you'll name it whatever you want to name it. I guess, Jeff, whatever you name the first document will be the name that gets built on, and it'll just have numbers after that.
I'll call it Fred, just to be clear, just Fred.
And everybody's gonna say, what does Fred stand for? But hey, there you go. That might be your cat for all I know. So cool. So we have agreement. Jeff is gonna do the first one pager, which could be 3 pages, 1 to 3 pager, we'll say. They call it, number the documents, send to all 6. And our next meet at Zoom subgroup Zoom is needed. As needed. Our next meeting is going to be, where are we? March
April.
12th, or April, sorry. April 12th is our next meeting. And I don't know if you would mind, but again, I do think all correspondence for the subgroup, it's good to be including all 6 of us. And I don't know whether you'd mind if you're having a Zoom and if I'm available. I don't know if you'd mind if I listened in. But I don't have to, but I certainly can. But in any event, I think it is good for all correspondences to go to everybody, because you never know who might have a piece of input that's helpful. So even if you have a Zoom subgroup meeting, that's not the regular meeting. So our next formal meeting is April 12th. But I appreciate people, again, the communication to all 6 of us as different document levels get created. And if you do a Zoom meeting, and if anything gets to the point where it's not working, tell me and I'll help rearrange, because I want to facilitate in a way that is constructive, and I appreciate feedback. I think we have a plan, and I think we've covered the agenda. Is there anything else that we need to say about the plan or anything?
Plan.
Was that Ed?
No, I don't think we have anything further at this meeting to talk about the plan. We have a plan. Jeffrey's going to come up with document 1 and we'll relate to it.
And I definitely want to thank everybody for the passion and urgency on this topic. So it's, I feel the energy. And I thank everybody for bringing the energy. And Connor, you've been on mute. Are you able to, I don't know if you had any opinions you wanted to share, Connor.
No, I'm sorry. I'm on mute because my connection has been pretty bad lately, so I'm trying not to be disruptive. But maybe that was just because of the attendance we had the last couple of meetings. But no, I'm fine with all of that, and I like the direction we're going in.
Perfect. Okay. I just want to make sure you had a chance to weigh in. So, and Dave, I guess you're okay with the direction too, I'm guessing.
Sure.
Okay. We have a plan, and a great thank you to everybody, again, for the passion and dedication and urgency that you're showing to this topic, which is extremely important. And we'll see where we are in 3 weeks. I'm looking forward to it, and looking forward to seeing the communications until then. Anything else we wanted to cover before we adjourn? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Yay, Ed. Second. Jeff, I saw Jeff. All in favor? Aye. Yay, I saw hands up, and yay. Aye. And we did our meeting in an hour. Yay, that's always our goal. So cool. Alrighty, so I'll be looking for emails in the meantime, and we will all get together in 3 weeks. And thank you.
Have a good one.
Great, thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Adios.